So what's your name?
My name is Josephine Campana.
And where did you live during Sandy?
I lived in East Rockaway, Long Island. East Rockaway is very far south on Long Island between Hewitt and Oceanside on the South Shore.
Okay. So how long have you been staying in that house?
I was renting that bungalow house for 6 years.
Okay, 6 years. So can you explain the course of events during the time of Sandy?
Okay, the year prior to Sandy, we had Irene, and we were told to evacuate because I'm in Zone A, which is like the most dangerous, being that I was surrounded by the Bay Area, which I guess technically would be like Jamaica Bay, and also the fact that I had big canals coming in on each side of where I lived, one in East Rockaway down the block from me, and on the other side, which is Oceanside. And the year prior to Sandy, when we had Irene, we were told to evacuate. And I had a neighbor on the block who's lived there for 70 years. He was born there. His father built that house. And the proximity of my house to the canal was literally maybe about 50 feet, 60 feet. But he told me that in all the years that he lived there, water has never come down that block, that particular block. So he wasn't going to evacuate. But it so happened that with Irene, we had about 3 feet of water come down our block. Luckily, it didn't do a lot of damage except for people who had basements, and it's very rare where I live that people had basements because we were so close to the water. So I had like a 3-4 foot crawl space under the house, so the water just went under the house, and that year we were spared. Then just before Sandy was hit, they were predicting Sandy. Again, we were evacuated. This time we were evacuated like 2 days before Sandy. And I had evacuated up to a friend's house, who was actually technically still in the A line, on the A line border. And I left my house on Sunday and Sandy hit Monday evening. And where I was staying at the time, the house was okay, but being it was, the house was a little bit raised, it was a townhouse complex, and the parking lot to the townhouses was more on a street level. And that evening, Monday evening around 8 o'clock, when we heard the car alarms go off, we went to look outside and noticed that there was like 3-4 feet of water that just completely enveloped the parking lot where all the cars were, and we basically lost all the cars in the parking lot. We were lucky it started coming into the backyard, but it didn't go as high as the house, so the house itself was okay. So that's where I was that evening. I was at a friend's house that evening that Sandy hit. We lost cell phone, we lost power, all power, all electricity. Cell phones were out, and we really couldn't do anything until daylight came. When daylight came, we went to the neighbor's house, who fortunately had a landline. She was the only one in the complex with a landline who was able to communicate with people. So we managed to call some people. My nephew came to get me from where I was staying and drove me to my house in East Rockaway, which I knew was going to be really bad. I knew, if we got water where I was staying, where I had evacuated to, I could just imagine what my neighborhood was going to look like. And sure enough, it was next to impossible to get close to the house because of the water was retreating at that point, and it had retreated off my block, but the whole area around it, my nephew wasn't able to really drive too close to the house because of all the surrounding area where there was still water levels, and also it was coming out from the ground, what are those, those grids, like all the water.
Yeah.
It was still like shooting out from the ground. So we managed to walk in like 2 feet of disgusting, smelly, icy cold water to get to the house, and finally got to the house, and is when I opened the door, and you've been to my house, so you know that when you walk in, it's like the living room, and the kitchen is all the way at the end of the house. But when I walked in my door, the very first thing I remember seeing, it was when I looked down, was Sam and Kismet's food bowls, the ceramic bowls that I kept in the kitchen. They just made their way all the way like to the front of the house, and everything in the house was like completely turned about, like all the furniture, everything. So we got about 3 to 4 feet in the house. So that the amount of water that came through and then, went back out, it just destroyed pretty much everything. Furniture was everywhere. So, so that's the events of that evening. I evacuated Sunday. I was at a friend's house when the hurricane actually hit, and I wasn't able to get back to my house until the day after, which would have been Tuesday morning, and to see all the destruction and what actually happened, and everybody in the whole area was affected, and we were out of power for where I was staying for about 2 weeks. So I actually had to move in with my sister for some time until we got power again. But I never went back. I think that's one of your next questions, as far as...
Yeah. So, I mean, like, in terms of percentage, how much property would you say you lost?
I lost everything in the house from the floor to 4 feet up was affected.
Okay.
So basically furniture, mainly I just got rid of all the furniture. Like vacuums or anything that you would imagine, being on ground level was affected. It was like all salt water, so I just basically pretty much lost a lot of my possessions, and mainly furniture and stuff.
Okay. So do you still stay there?
No, when I was renting the house, I was renting the house. So when I saw my landlady, she had told me that she was planning to fix the house as soon as possible, and if I would be willing or wanting to come back to live there after it's fixed. And I chose not to, because...
So why did you choose to relocate?
I chose to relocate because between Irene and between Sandy, and all the other crazy weather patterns that were going on that year and the year of Irene and stuff, I just felt strongly in my heart that it's just not safe being around water, or being that close to water anymore. Like my neighbor said, who lived there for 70 years, not a drop of water ever came down the block, no matter what nor'easter we were having, or no matter what kind of weather condition it was. And now all of a sudden, 2 years in a row, first year having 3 feet, and then Sandy, there's about 8 to 9 feet of water that just enveloped that whole area. So I almost actually felt as though after Irene, I don't know if it was just an intuition I was having, but that's when I actually started to look for a house that's further north, away from the South Shore and further north. And that's when I was telling my friend, I think it's time for us to move further inland on Long Island. And nobody, I guess no one really took it serious until Sandy happened. And I was standing next to my friend and I said, didn't I tell you? I was like, didn't I tell you we need to move north? And so I have strong feelings that it's no longer safe because of weather patterns that are being, I believe, affected by so many other issues that we were discussing earlier. I don't know if you want me to get into that, but that's why I said that's a whole other, that's a whole other topic. But for me personally, I love the water. I feel most at ease near water, and for me it's calming and soothing, but I no longer feel safe. No longer feel safe. And it's not because, oh, I had a bad incident happen to me. It's because I really do think that the weather patterns are going to become more and more severe as time goes by. And so there are more opportunities for hurricanes and stuff to happen. So I just don't want to be near water.
Okay. So, I mean, would you ever consider living near water again, or?
No. No.
So did the government compensate for any of your land loss for your land lady? Did you get a flood buyout?
Well, I believe that all homes in that area that have a mortgage, then flood insurance is required. I know that my landlord had flood insurance for the house. I don't know what the specifics were as far as how they were compensated to rebuild the house, but the whole house had to be done over. The whole entire floor had to be ripped out, and the walls were taken down. Everything was like, it was like when I went back about 2 weeks later when they started to work on the house, when the construction people were there, they literally ripped everything out. So, and have to start all over again. So I don't know what the percentage, what they were covered for. But I know that they did have flood insurance and obviously homeowners insurance. So they have as far as FEMA helping them, because it was a rental house, I don't think that FEMA would help to pay for the mortgage because they weren't living there. It wasn't their home. They were renting a home. My personal experience was because as a renter, I had renter's insurance, but renter's insurance doesn't cover for flood. So I wasn't reimbursed for anything that I lost. And FEMA did come to the house. I did file a claim with FEMA, but it was a very small amount of like $2,700 that they compensated me with, and that was it.
Wow, okay. So do you think the government should offer flood buyouts? Do you think it's a good idea?
I think it is, again, because I feel like there will be, more severe conditions coming in the future. And I think that, we should learn from this and make it as safe as possible. And if by flood buyout meaning just buy the property, get the people out, move people more inland, then yeah, I think that's a good option. But it's like, but people also, everyone should have the right to also live where they want to live and be able, to fix, because I know a lot of people would want that option of staying. And and taking a chance. But the government should definitely be responsible in at least offering and saying that, you know, this is just a safety precaution if you no longer feel confident about living so close to the water, you know, be it on the North Shore of Long Island or the South Shore of Long Island. So I think so.
Okay, so as a final closing question, what would you like to tell people who live in flood-prone areas regarding future storms and the danger?
Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I do think that they're going to be more persistent. Weather patterns are getting more intense for many different reasons, like we were talking, you know, about before. And I don't think it's such a great idea to be in those, what they categorize as like, you know, A zones, which is like, you know, the closest to the water, you know. Unless you have a situation where, you know, and this is going to vary obviously depending on where you live, but you know, if you're in a situation where your house is raised, like on Fire Island, you know, some beautiful homes are on the beach, but they're so far away or they're so far high that, you know, water can't really get to it. In situations like that, yeah, but I'd say no. I would really advise people, you know, not to buy by the water, just to play it safe, go further inland, hope that these weather patterns, you know, if I'm wrong, that, you know, they'll just calm down and it was just like a series of like a bad decade or something. But I don't think that's the case, so that's why I would advise people to stay away from the water.
Okay, so thank you for participating.
You're welcome.
Yeah.